Someone walked into a dealership last month and handed over a car worth £3,000 more than they were paid for it. They drove home believing they had negotiated well. This video exists because one person decided to talk. Someone who spent 16 years inside UK franchise dealerships, working as a salesperson, then as a used car buyer, and finally as an appraiser responsible for valuing part exchange vehicles across 3 separate sites. Someone who sat across the table from thousands of buyers and assessed thousands of cars with information the buyer never had access to. Someone who, after leaving the industry 2 years ago, agreed to describe what actually happens to your part exchange from the moment you mention it to the moment it leaves the forecourt. What follows is what they told us. Not every dealer operates this way. Not every appraiser uses every technique this individual describes. But according to our source, the part exchange process in UK car sales is built around a structural information advantage that consistently favors the dealer and consistently costs the buyer money they never know they lost. By the end of this, you will understand how your car is valued before you arrive, what happens to that valuation during the negotiation, how the relationship between your part exchange value and the sale price is managed to obscure the real spread, what information about your car the dealer already has before you say a word, and what our source described as the most reliable single technique for extracting the maximum from a part exchange without the buyer noticing. That final point is coming in point number 8. Our source described it as so consistently effective that they used it in some form on nearly every transaction they were involved in during their final years in the role. Before we reach it, a question worth sitting with. When you last traded a car at a dealership, did you know its trade value before you walked in? Not the retail price on a comparison website, not what a friend said it was worth, the actual trade value, the number a dealer would pay at auction, the number your car would make if the dealer sold it tomorrow without your name attached to it. And most people do not know that number. According to our source, that gap in knowledge is where the part exchange profit lives. Point number 1. The valuation happens before you arrive. This is the first thing most buyers do not know. Every major dealer group and most independent franchise sites subscribe to trade valuation systems. CAPHPI and Glass's Guide are the industry standards. These systems provide real-time trade valuations based on auction data, wholesale market movements, and regional demand. A dealer can input your registration number and retrieve a trade valuation, a retail valuation, and a forecast of how that value will move over the coming weeks before you have set foot in the showroom. Our source described using this capability routinely. When a customer booked an appointment and mentioned during the call that they had a part exchange, the registration number was taken as standard practice. By the time the customer arrived, the appraiser already knew the trade value of the car to within a narrow range, had checked the MOT history on the DVSA database, had reviewed any finance outstanding using an HPI check, and had noted the mileage trajectory from the MOT records to assess whether the stated mileage was consistent with historical data. The customer walks in believing the appraisal is about to happen. According to our source, the appraisal in its most consequential form has already happened. This matters for one specific reason. The appraiser who greets you and walks around your car with a clipboard is performing a confirmation exercise, not a discovery exercise. They are confirming what they already know and looking for conditions in the physical vehicle that justify adjustments downward from a figure they have already decided on. They are not approaching your car with an open mind. They already know where they want to end up. Our source described this as the most important structural advantage the dealer holds in the part exchange conversation because the buyer arrives believing the evaluation is mutual and uncertain. It is neither, but knowing the trade value in advance is only the beginning of what the dealer knows that you do not. Point number 2. Your car's history is fully visible before you describe it. Most buyers know that a dealer will conduct an HPI check on a vehicle they are taking in part exchange. What most buyers do not know is how much information that check, combined with freely available public data, reveals before the conversation about your car has begun. The DVSA MOT history is public and free. It shows every MOT result, every mileage recorded at each test, every failure item, and every advisory note since the vehicle was first registered. A dealer looking at your registration number can see how your car has been maintained, whether the mileage is consistent, whether it has had recurring advisories that suggest underlying issues, and whether it failed any MOT and what for. Our source described using this data specifically to identify inconsistencies between what the customer would claim about the car and what the public record showed. A customer who described their car as having a full service history, but whose MOT record showed a failure for brake condition 2 years ago, is presenting a different vehicle than their description implies. A customer whose mileage at the most recent MOT was 12,000 miles higher than the previous year's test, having previously been doing 8,000 miles annually, has had a change in circumstances that affects residual values and may affect their urgency to sell. This individual told us that in their experience, most customers describe their part exchange in its best possible light. Not dishonestly, not with intent to deceive, simply because they know what they paid for the car, they remember it in positive terms, and they want to receive a valuation that reflects that affection. The data the dealer already holds does not share that affection. The consequence is an appraisal conversation in which one party has full documented information about the vehicle and the other party has their own memory and a retail estimate from a comparison website. According to our source, that asymmetry determines the outcome before either party has said a word about money. And there is a layer beyond the public data that makes the dealer's informational advantage even more complete. Point number 3. Dealers know the current wholesale market for your specific car in your specific region. You almost certainly do not. Trade valuations are not national averages. They are regional and they move quickly. A diesel SUV that is commanding strong trade prices in one region because local dealers have a shortage of that vehicle in stock might be worth £300 to £400 less in a different region where there is a glut of identical stock at the nearest auction centre. Our source described how this regional variation is tracked and used. At the sites they worked, the used car buyer attended or monitored regional auction results weekly. They had direct relationships with trade buyers across the region. They knew which stock was moving and which was sitting. They knew which vehicles were oversupplied locally and which were in demand. That knowledge directly influenced how they valued part exchanges. A customer with a car that happened to match a gap in the dealer's used stock was not told their car was particularly desirable at that moment. They were offered the standard trade valuation or below, because the dealer's interest in acquiring the vehicle was not information that served the customer's negotiating position. The dealer bought it at trade, retailed it at a premium above retail because of the stock shortage, and the customer never knew that their car was worth more than they were told in that specific market at that specific time. Conversely, a customer with a car that happened to be overrepresented in local stock was told, sometimes explicitly, that the market for that vehicle was difficult at the moment. Our source described using this framing routinely. It was accurate in the sense that the dealer genuinely had limited appetite for another example of that vehicle, but the framing was also strategically deployed to introduce doubt in the customer's mind about the value of their car and reduce their resistance to a lower offer. This individual was direct about that. It was a sales technique as much as it was a market assessment. And according to them, it worked reliably. But the regional market knowledge is a passive advantage. What our source described next is an active technique. Point number 4. The physical appraisal is a psychological tool as much as it is a mechanical assessment. When an appraiser walks around your car with you present, the way they behave, what they touch, what they say, and what they do not say is calibrated to influence your perception of your car's value before a number is mentioned. Our source described this process in specific terms. The appraiser looks for conditions that can be noted visibly and verbally in front of the customer. A scuff on a bumper is not simply recorded on the appraisal sheet. It is pointed to, measured against the gauge on the clipboard, and noted in a way that the customer observes. A stone chip on the bonnet is not simply seen. It is shown to the customer with a comment about how these things affect trade value. None of this is dishonest. These conditions are genuine and they do affect the vehicle's trade value. But according to our source, the communication of these conditions serves a dual purpose. It creates a paper trail that justifies deductions. And it lowers the customer's expectations before the valuation is offered, making a lower number feel more reasonable when it arrives. Our source described a specific technique that they observed experienced appraisers use consistently. Before offering any valuation figure, the appraiser would pause, refer to their notes, and say something to the effect of, "I just want to be honest with you, because I think it is important you understand the market for this car at the moment." This phrasing, according to our source, was not spontaneous honesty. It was a trained transition from the appraisal phase to the offer phase, designed to make the customer feel they were about to receive transparent and objective information. The valuation that followed was no more transparent or objective than any other, but delivered after that phrasing, in the experience of this individual, it met significantly less resistance. And the offer itself, when it comes, is only the beginning of the negotiation, because of what happens next. Point number 5. The part exchange valuation and the sale price are managed together, not separately, and the customer only ever sees one side. Our source described what they called the swings and roundabouts of the part exchange negotiation. The total profit available to the dealer on any transaction involving a part exchange has two components: the margin on the car being sold and the margin on the car being acquired. These two components can be adjusted against each other in ways that make it impossible for the customer to assess whether the overall deal is fair. A customer who pushes back on the part exchange valuation and succeeds in securing an additional £300 can be given exactly that, while £300 is simultaneously added to the asking price of the car they are buying, or removed from a discount that was available but had not yet been offered. The total spread for the dealer remains unchanged. The customer believes they have won a negotiation they have not actually won. Our source described this as the most consistent pattern in the transactions they were involved in. Customers were rarely shown the true margin on either element of the deal. They were shown movements in individual numbers in response to their negotiation, and those movements were real. But they were managed within a total that the dealer had set in advance. The customer who negotiates hard on the part exchange and accepts the first offer on the car has almost certainly not come out better than the customer who does the reverse. They have simply redistributed the available margin in a different direction. This individual described finding this aspect of the role increasingly uncomfortable toward the end of their career because it meant that effort and persistence by the customer, which should logically produce better outcomes, was largely absorbed by the structure of the deal rather than genuinely conceded by the dealer. And there is a specific moment in every transaction when this management of the numbers is at its most active. Point number 6. When you accept the part exchange offer, your car becomes significantly more valuable immediately. Our source described what happens the moment a customer agrees to the part exchange figure and the deal moves to completion. Until that moment, the part exchange is presented to the customer as a problem, a complication, a vehicle with market challenges. The moment the deal is agreed, the same vehicle is assessed with entirely different eyes. This individual described the internal process of reconsidering a part exchange vehicle after acquisition. The questions that are now asked are: what is the fastest route to retail? What does this car need to be presented at its best? And what is the realistic retail price? Those questions produce different answers than the appraisal questions, which were: what are the risks in this vehicle? What deductions can we apply? And what is the lowest figure the customer will accept? Our source described specific cases where vehicles acquired as part exchanges were assessed after acquisition and found to be in better condition or with stronger market appeal than the appraisal conversation had implied. Not because the appraisal was inaccurate, because the appraisal had been conducted with a commercial objective that was different from the retail assessment conducted afterward. The practical consequence is that vehicles acquired as part exchanges are often retailed at prices significantly above the trade value offered to the customer, and that gap is not always fully explained by reconditioning costs, preparation, and dealer overhead. Some of it is structural margin created by the information advantage the dealer held throughout the transaction. This individual gave one specific example that they said stayed with them. A customer traded a well-maintained 3-year-old family estate in a desirable color with full dealer service history. The customer was offered and accepted £7,200. The vehicle was prepared and retailed 8 weeks later for £11,450. The reconditioning invoice was £380. The dealer's acquisition margin alone, before any retail expenses, was over £3,800 on a vehicle the customer had believed was difficult to value, and none of that was illegal. All of it was the predictable consequence of one party knowing significantly more than the other throughout the transaction. Point number 7. Outstanding finance changes everything, and not always in the way the customer expects. Our source described how finance settlements interact with part exchange transactions in ways that frequently disadvantage the customer without any deliberate intent to do so, but with consequences that can be severe. When you trade a vehicle with outstanding finance, the dealer takes responsibility for settling the finance before the vehicle is registered in their name. The settlement figure is obtained from the finance company. If the settlement figure is higher than the part exchange valuation, the difference is a negative equity position. Most customers understand this in principle. What our source described is the practical application, specifically how negative equity is absorbed into the new deal and presented to the customer. A customer with a vehicle valued at $8,500 who has a finance settlement of $10,200 is in negative equity of £1,700. That £1,700 must be covered somehow. According to our source, the standard approach is to absorb it into the deposit structure of the new agreement, the new finance balance, or a combination of both. The customer starts their new agreement already £1,700 behind. What this individual found was that this was frequently not explained to customers with the clarity the amount warranted. The focus of the conversation remained on the monthly payment of the new agreement. The negative equity appeared in the documentation and was, in a technical sense, disclosed, but the verbal conversation, according to our source, rarely paused to confirm that the customer understood they were beginning a new financial commitment while carrying a loss from the previous one. The consequence is a customer who drives away in a new car with a sense of having resolved the previous agreement, when in fact they have carried its unresolved balance forward and are now paying interest on it. And according to our source, for buyers who move from PCP to PCP without a clear understanding of their equity position, this can compound across multiple transactions in a way that creates a growing financial exposure they may not become aware of for years. But none of what we have covered so far comes close to what our source told us next. This is the part the industry will not want you to hear. Point number 8. The technique our source described as most consistently effective has no name they were ever given for it. They simply called it making the first offer feel final. Here is how it works. The appraiser conducts the physical inspection, processes the internal valuation, and arrives at a figure they are prepared to offer. That figure is not the maximum the dealer would pay for the vehicle. It is below the maximum by a margin the dealer is prepared to give up if the customer pushes back. According to our source, this buffer is built into almost every part exchange offer as standard practice. The technique is in how the offer is delivered. It is not presented as an opening position. It is presented as the result of a careful and thorough assessment. It is delivered with specific supporting detail. The appraiser references the mileage, the condition notes, the current market. They provide reasons. They use the word unfortunately more than once. They present a written figure. The written figure matters. According to our source, a spoken number invites counteroffer in a way that a written number on a formal appraisal sheet does not. The written number carries the implicit authority of having been calculated and committed to on paper. Customers who would readily respond to a verbal offer with a counteroffer are more likely to accept a written offer without challenging it, because the written format implies a process that has already produced the answer. Our source described training newer colleagues in this technique and feeling at the time that it was simply good sales practice. What they described feeling later was that it was a method of neutralizing the customer's instinct to negotiate at the point where negotiation would have been most beneficial to them. The implication of this is direct. The first written offer on your part exchange is almost never the maximum the dealer will pay. The buffer that was built into it before you arrived is available to be conceded if you ask. Most customers do not ask because the presentation of the offer implies there is nothing to ask for. Our source suggested that a simple, direct request, something to the effect of, "I appreciate the assessment. I would like you to go back and confirm this is the best you can do," delivered without aggression and without a counteroffer, is enough in many cases to produce a revised figure. Not always, but often enough that not making that request is leaving money on the table in most transactions. This individual said that during the years they trained appraisers, they never once told a trainee to offer the maximum figure first. Not because they were instructed not to, because the structure of the role rewarded not doing so, and nobody questioned it. Point number 9. Our source left the industry because they reached a point where the daily experience of holding information their customers needed and choosing not to share it was incompatible with how they wanted to spend their working life. They were not pushed out. They resigned and accepted a significant drop in income to do so. They agreed to speak because they believe most part exchange customers in Britain are losing money they are not aware they are losing on transactions where the outcome was effectively decided before they arrived, using information they did not know existed and techniques they had no reason to recognize. Here is what our source said you should do. Before you visit any dealership with a part exchange, check your vehicle's MOT history on the DVSA public checker. Know what advisories are on the record. Know what failure items appear in the history. Know whether your mileage is consistent. The dealer already knows all of this. You should too. Obtain a trade valuation from at least 2 independent sources before the appointment. Revian and Motorway provide instant offers that reflect actual trade market conditions. These are not retail figures, they are genuine purchase offers. They tell you what a buyer in the current trade market will pay for your car today. That is the number the dealer is working from. When the appraisal figure is presented to you in writing, do not respond immediately. Ask for time to consider it. Then make a single direct request for the best possible offer without specifying a counter figure. In many cases, according to our source, this alone produces a revised number. Negotiate the sale price and the part exchange as separate transactions if possible. Agree the price of the car you are buying first in writing before the part exchange conversation begins. This prevents the swings and roundabouts management this individual described throughout their career. If you have outstanding finance, obtain your own settlement figure from your finance company before visiting the dealer. Know your equity position before anyone else tells you what it is. 3 things to remember. The dealer knew the value of your car before you arrived. The first offer was not the best offer, and the information gap between you and the appraiser is the most expensive thing in the room. One question for the comments. Have you ever discovered, after the fact, what a dealer sold your part exchange for? What was the difference?